Welcome to this week's Ford Mustang GT3 video tutorial for a race lap around Daytona, driven by myself in the track conditions as shown on VRS. My name is Pascalis Georgis, and together we're going to take a full lap around the track first, before we start our video tutorial. We are back in our analyzer for another weekly video tutorial around IMSA with the Ford Mustang GT3. We're going to visit Daytona for the second time in a row with this car. We went to Daytona just a week ago with for the Sprint Series, and where Moreno is covering the data. And now is the time to switch to IMSA multi-class series, so we're going to have to deal with the traffic. I took Moreno's setup from week 3, reworked it a bit, did a few tweaks, and now we're gonna check what we've prepared here. We have the race and qualifying setups. We have the full version of the race setup, and for each setup there is a safe version for you to try. In the wet setup section, we'll find all the raid-ready adjustments we've done for the car to be to be compatible in rain conditions. Now, of course, it won't rain in the official series, but I always feel it's necessary to put those setups in case you want to drive the cars in solo testing, or if you have a league race that you may need the rain setup. In the other files, we will find the best lap and the optimal data lap files, which allow you to load the lap into the simulator and go against the coach, which of course it will be myself, and the replay file of the fastest lap time. 145.187 will be the lap that we are going to view together, and you can find all the relevant track conditions on the right hand side and input them in the UI. 28 air, 42 track, so really hot, even hotter than week 3 of the Sprint Series. So in a low downforce setup like this one, we're going to have to be extra careful and definitely drive with a lot of precision. But let's get started. And we will now start with the run towards turn 1, coming out of the start finish line and heading towards the very first corner with speeds up to 280, very, very fast. Looking now at the final line of this section, this is pretty much where our braking zone is going to be located. Try to start braking just a bit before that, and also position the car on the right of the line. You don't want to enter a bit too tight for this braking zone, but it's an approach that we have to carry through the whole braking zone, not just initially. I'm always trying to keep the car as wide as possible, extend the braking zone by braking a bit early, but controlling the input a bit more, instead of braking as late as possible and having to apply greater braking forces. So keeping it very wide, braking now, as you can see, edging towards the right side of the road in order to create a really good angle that is really necessary. And then, as the speed of the car has gone down, I'm now releasing the brakes in order to point the front end of the car. The front end of the car that isn't really agile. If we are honest here, the Ford is very numb and very lazy on those slow speed corners. So we have to do our best with our cornering approach, but also our braking to maximize the potential of the car here. As you can see, the car complies quite well as I'm off the brakes. Now turning in after the tire stack and keeping a very tight line. Something really, really important because it allows us to open up the throttle, use the whole width of the track, and get a good exit. If you are already wide at the apex, it will only get worse as we head out of the corner and we have to fight out the curbs. Now those curbs are not as flat as they used to be, so that adds another challenge to the mix. But in my opinion, it's just the initial braking that kind of dictates everything. If you start braking really aggressively because you just brake late, the car will be very hard to recover, if not impossible. Now on the exit, as we said, it is definitely a part of the track that now is a bit tighter with those 3D curbs. They're not as smooth anymore. We cannot run over them. And now we'll head towards the hairpin, spot the final line here. That is going to be our braking reference pretty much, or the patch on the track right here. You can use it as a reference as well, a bit earlier before reaching those patches, of course. Keeping a relatively constant brake pressure, and then of course trying to line the car up as wide as I possibly can, especially with a Ford that is not the most suitable car for those corners. Getting early on the brakes again, and trying to line the car up relatively late into the corner. You'll see me here having a lot of distance from the inside part of the hairpin, but then closing in right at the middle and towards the exit in order to straighten the car very, very quickly. This is the way to go. It's always a bit easier to lose the apex, to miss the apex in sections like this, because you're aiming for such a late entry point, but it makes the exit so much better. You'll see me here getting back on the throttle very confidently, putting the power down and getting a great run off the corner. And that's exactly what we are looking to do here. On the way in, it's preferable to stay in second. First is just way too short. And yeah, the thing to avoid, as I mentioned, is to avoid attacking the inside of the corner too quickly, because once you do that, you're stuck into a very tight line, and you have to steer a lot while accelerating, which makes it very, very tricky. Whereas now, as you can see, I'm gradually getting back on the power, getting more and more aggressive on the throttle, and that leads me very well off this corner and towards the back straight that follows. Then we have the very fast left kink. Just keep the car as wide as tight as you possibly can on that curb, and then we will start braking immediately right next to the line, the end of the line. It's pretty much where I'll start braking, keeping the car nice and wide and maintaining the car's position around the middle of the track as we approach this braking zone. Not the easiest one. It's quite of a long right-hander, which we have to navigate around, and you cannot enter too tightly and get on the curb too early, because you're just going to be stuck over a tight part of the track with limited space on the inside, but also which will also impact your exit on the way out. So try to be as gradual as you can on the brakes, and that's the most critical part. If you miss a braking point, the car will just run wide and it's over. It has to be a fine balance between under driving it and getting too early, and obviously running wide. And In this particular case, I'm getting on the brakes, releasing before turning in, and now waiting for the front end of the car to kind of point back towards the inside. But as you can see, we're well into the corner. It's not at the initial stage. And as you'll notice as well here, this is the point where I'm turning in, right where the curb switches, if it makes sense. So I'm not gonna really commit until the halfway point of that corner, which will then allow us to straighten the exit very well. I'm staying in second, which allows me to be relatively aggressive on the throttle input, and that leads me very nicely on the way out and towards this small straightaway before turn 6. Turn 6, one of the most important corners, as it leads us into the oval section, and a section where we're going to be flat out for a long period of time. I'm going to start braking pretty much at the end of the line here, getting as quickly as I possibly can on the brakes on a straight line, braking very, very efficiently, of course. And then I'll pretty much release them as I start to turn in. It's critical here to not overspeed as you enter, because the rear end will start moving, and it's quite bumpy at the apex. So if you carry excessive speed on the way in, the rear end tends to get loose, and that carries over on the exit, and that's very, very inefficient. I'm trying to really slow the car down initially, then turn in where I have plenty of grip. The car bites quite nicely. As you can see, we are aiming for a relatively late apex, not using the curb initially, and obviously being able to take the shortest path like this allows us then to get back on the throttle. But at this point now, you have to be so careful. You have to have a very smooth entry, but also a very smooth exit, applying the throttle very gently, very progressively, which will prevent wheel spin. If we get wheel spin here, not only we will lose traction, but that carries over the whole stretch where we are going to be flat out, and that's really critical. What else you can do to maximize the run here is always keeping the wheel as straight as possible, because that will minimize the chance of the rear end stepping out. And then, of course, even if you take a slightly wider line, that's fine. You're gonna build a bit more momentum, which will recover in the oval section. Now, stay at the bottom here. Avoid the yellow line on the inside in the banking and the apron, basically. And then we'll continue fully flat out until the bus stop, where I would say the bus stop chicane is probably the hardest part of the track to kind of keep the car balanced, because it's such a fast section with entering it with a low down for setup. So it's never going to feel very grippy or very responsive. It's always going to be a bit of a struggle. Now, as we approach the chicane, spot the 3 board, spot the 2. Right after that, we're going to start braking. I'm always looking at this. Is it a yellow light indicator? I'm not sure what it really is, but I'm always paying attention to that. Keeping the car there as wide as possible and braking right around that area. Getting on the brakes, trying to slow the car down while we are still in a straight line is essential, because if you enter with a lot of speed, the rear end is going to feel very, very loose. And once you heat up the rear tires at the turning point, that just carries over for the duration of this whole section. So emphasize a lot into slowing down sufficiently and then turn in. Once you do that together, the car will react well. It will grip up very nicely, and yeah, as you can see here, I'm cutting through the first part of the curb as much as possible, straight lining it quite well. Now, the track limits are adjusted, so we cannot touch the grass, so make sure you don't do that. Do not get a slowdown. But this first part, lining the first part this well, now allows us to have a good angle for the second one. I'm going to tap the brake once, I'm going to downshift into third, and that's exactly how I will go over the inside curb right here, which is exactly what I'll do in this case. Going nicely around over that curb one more time, leaving a bit of a gap from the inside, from the right line, which will create enough of an angle for the final 2 stages of the chicane. Cutting through the first curb, cutting through the final one as well. This is on the limit, which is exactly how I really feel we should be. But more importantly, the rear end is stable. I'm not hesitating at all, kind of kind of aggressive on the power throughout the whole section, but it just takes all this preparing before. That's where the difference can be made, by just backing the car up and setting it up nicely for the exit. And of course, that will also carry over very neatly all the way down to that oval section until the start finish line. In terms of traffic, Daytona is definitely a classic track. Some sections will be a bit more tricky, some will be a bit more straightforward. Turn one, always open up your line. Just make sure you're always staying connected with the first corner. Even if you open up initially to allow a faster car to pass, you definitely want to keep the car nicely tidy on the exit here in order to maximize the run. Remain predictable as you go here. Those tall curbs are going to be tricky to manage with cars around you. And definitely don't change direction too aggressively. Into the hairpin, heavy braking zone. Of course, the prototypes will be aggressive there. Good overtaking spot, really. Always allow the inside open and focus on maximizing the exit. Into the fast kink that follows. If somebody passes you before the turn-in, that's good. If they come right as you turn in, probably best to lift and open up your line. It's gonna be tricky, but whenever you can allow the move to happen before you actually turn in, just take the opportunity, because it's just gonna be worth it. Now, into this long braking zone, always keep the car well to the left, because it's pretty narrow and very easy to collide with a car. And then focus on just positioning the car well and staying single file on the exit. Into turn 6, pretty easy to manage as well, by leaving the inside open. Just when you turn in, make sure that you're not too close and avoid running into a car that is passing, and it will definitely be so at the apex. And it's worth just lifting sometimes, allow the move to happen, and then just shooting towards the corner and getting the most efficient exit. This is the best part, because you can just stay on the inside and allow those moves to happen around you. You don't have to do absolutely anything, which is good. And into the bus stop, always very tricky, of course. Spot the mirror, check your mirrors at all times. I mean, there's gonna be those rare cases where somebody will just dive in, even if you have started turning in. This is where you'll need to be really careful. But in general, watch the mirrors. Know if the car can pass you. If you know that they can pass you, just lift early. Allow the move to happen and take your normal line. Maybe a bit of dirty air if you have a car in front of you, but it is worth it, and you save a bit of fuel. You have a good line through the chicane, and your exit will also be sufficient. And of course, the same applies here into the oval section. Keep the car at the bottom on the left, and just stay flat out until the start finish line. That was our video tutorial around Daytona with the Ford Mustang GT3, and I hope that you enjoyed all the data that was provided, as well as this video tutorial. We're going to be back in a week's time for week 5, and I'm not sure where we are actually going. We're going at Mosport, where it's going to be rainy. So until then, have a great week of racing, and see you soon.
Hello everyone, welcome to this new VRS tutorial for the GT3 Sprint Series. This week we are at the Daytona International Speedway with the new Ford Mustang GT3, and as usual guys, you'll be able to find all the dry setups here, some wet setup, even if there is no rain expected for this week. Replay for our best lap time, the two file for the in-game lap time tab, and the VRS condition tab, where you can just copy and paste the weather from here into your UI, launch the session from there, so you can replicate the exact same weather conditions as we had in the session. As you can see, a very long, lengthy session I had. Unfortunately, this car, I'd say it's very similar to the AMG. It has some critical rear end when we are driving a low downforce configuration setup. It's quite difficult to find the right balance. We don't have a lot of tools, let's say, to try and fix the car or like try to dial in the car with a little bit lower setup because the if we fix something in high speed, it's still not working very well in low speed. It's quite a tricky one to deal with, especially, and now that we're going to play the lap, I'm going to show you around, especially the slow speed corners that we have plenty around here in the infield are very painful and requires a very specific driving trick technique. Let's start the lap. Obviously, from the trioval here, we move up towards the wall, and we use the caution light here as a reference for the braking zone on the top right here. As you can see, I'd say a car length before reaching the pole, we are going on the brakes. So obviously not stomping on the brakes since we are still steering in the corner, so we can't really abuse the ABS in this case, and you can see already a little bit of ABS lights here working. Down into second gear for turn one, you can see that I'm trying to open up the corner by driving close to the white line here. With some other cars, you can use even more track than I did with the Ford here. And then from this point onwards, starting to fade with the pressure, turn in, and right at the tire wall here on the inside, this is where you want to start to pick up the throttle back again and drive off the corner. I'm going to show you from the outside again. Watch out, once you cross the middle of the track, you can see that there is this little like black mark. You can see that there is like a different like banking of the car. Like here, it's like a negative camber, while once we go over this little crest here, like you can see the car goes like neutral again. And when you go over this, the rear can be very, very sketchy, extremely light, so watch out for that. And then, as I said, as soon as we cross the tire wall, back on power, try to hold the inside on the white line, and then from this point, flat out, let the car open over the outside curb. Watch out, we have new 3D curbs also on this track now. They are a lot higher than what we used before. And now into turn 3, at the hairpin here. You can use the end of the marking here on the road. It's pretty simple really for the reference. And you can see that as soon as we pass the end, I'd say a car length, yeah, probably even less, on the brakes. And now this is where the bad stuff begins with this car. The rear, we are obviously this car has a front engine, so a lot of weight is already on the front. Plus, in this case, we are braking quite heavily, so the rear became extremely light. We have low downforce, so that means that the rear it's even lighter than what normally would be. And that makes the rear insanely sensitive to our inputs. You can see that I have to be extremely precise with my steering. I had a tiny bit of oversteer there on entry. Down into first gear very, very late. You can probably hear from the sound. I'm actually going to play here. You can hear from the sound. I'm going into first gear very, very late. You can hear the engine drop. Then first gear, very gentle on power again. You can hear the engine rev very gently. and then at this point flat out. Another important thing is the line you have to take here. So you want to be obviously quite wide here on entry. Don't close too early, stay around the middle, down into first, close towards the inside now, and from this point you can apply. You can see I try to kind of squeeze a little bit the exit more than a normal corner, just to get the car rotated a little bit more, so that gives me a much straighter line exit and I can put the power down a lot easier. Now in the kink, easily flat, and now turn 5, very similar to turn 3, but in this case the entry is a lot tighter, so we need to slow down a little more on entry and grab the apex very early. For the braking zone, you can use the reference here of the service road here. Quite simple. As soon as we cross this corner here, this angle, you can see on the brakes. We want to follow this little dark line again in the middle of the track, and then from this point, as we approach the corner, again very late downshifting into first, and try to grab the inside curb here. Unfortunately, I slightly missed it, but the ideal line is that you have to drive on the inside curb. This gives you a little bit of extra rotation, and then nice and gentle on power. You can see the shape of the throttle input. Short shifting to second, so that gives you, especially during a long run, you can protect the rear tires a lot better. Short shifting to second gear makes it also a bit easier to control the power slides if you have any. Short stretch, and now into turn 6, the very famous turn 6, very bumpy, and the exit is crucial more than any other corner on the track. Again, for the braking reference, quite easy here with the service road here, right at the corner here of the white line. On the brakes, down into second, use all the track available here, literally braking on the curb there on the outside. Dive in, clip the inside curb, and then back on power. Here, unfortunately, I had a slightly bit of oversteer. This cost me less than a tenth, but like 700-800. That's because with this little slide, obviously the the traction kicks in, the traction control kicks in, and I'm going to lose momentum all the way here from the exit to the very long straight that we have now by using the oval part of the track here. Stay as low as possible. You want to minimize obviously the traveling distance. And now at this point we move close to the wall, preparing for the last corner, the bus stop. Again, very important exit, because then from this point we stay flat out all the way to the line. So it's very similar to turn 6. The exit here is very important. Braking zone, caution lights again. Quite easy to spot here with the yellow lights. You can see that literally as we are underneath the caution lights. Let's see if I can show you from the chase cam. Yeah, maybe you can see here on the top, and this is exactly where we start to brake. You want to be quite aggressive on the curbs here. You can see using literally everything we have, everywhere, pretty much, even cutting over the inside of the curb on the grass. This is super close to get an off track, but obviously with the low downforce setup and the car dialed in for the low speed to make it a little bit more drivable, means that we're going to have a little bit of understeer in high speed, which this is pretty much the only medium to high speed corner we have on this track. So that means that we have to be super precise with the lines, avoid to use too much steering angle in this high speed, and make it tight. So you pretty much want to straight line the corners here. Another important bit is the exit. As I said, very important to try and grab this inside curb here. It gives a little bit of extra rotation, and that means you can avoid the off track here on the exit. You can clip a little bit of gravel, but don't abuse it, because it's quite easy to get an off track. But yeah, I want to show you again. This is probably the most crucial corner on track. So very aggressive on the curb on entry, because obviously the more we cut here, the better we're going to have our line for the consequence corners. Cutting again over the inside curb, and then start to be back on power at this point. Pretty much as soon as we're getting off the curb here, back on power. Cut over the inside curb, and then on the edge here to get a good exit. You don't want any traction control to interfere. And now from this point onwards, we want to stay as tight as possible to the yellow line. And again, to minimize the traveling distance, try to move the steering as less as possible to avoid any scrubbing. And here we are back on the start-finish line. And that was a lap around Daytona with the new Mustang GT3. In qualifying or even in the race, you can use this little portion of the apron here on the bottom. But especially in a race, you the car that is, if you have a car next to you and it's on the banking, it does not have to give you space. So it's your responsibility to come back on track safely, just for your information. But yeah, as usual, guys, if you have any question or any feedback, just press the send feedback button, fill the form, and submit it. And yeah, that's it for this tutorial, and see you for the next one.